say. Only when you convert your ESOP pool into an ESOP policy does is there a requirement to go forward and file a MGT 14 form with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, and then it also becomes part of the public data which can be verified. So say for example, if I'm an employee and I look at a startup where that startup is offering ESOPs, I can go and verify at the Ministry of Corporate Affairs website. It gives me confidence that, okay, my ESOPs, if they're offered to me in my offer letter of joining, I would surely get the ESOPs. Yes, we have seen some challenges in the sense that people commit ESOPs on maybe just casual emails, and they end up not giving the ESOPs in the long run. That's a post governance compliance that needs to be done. We'll cover that point in one of the 15 points that we covered today. Okay, so if one of the founders of the startup exits, join a competitor, which therefore threatens the growth and viability, what can be done in this case? We'll cover this point. We have one of the 15 points as dispute. We'll cover that thing as well. And exits of the founders as well. For the pre-money capital, how should investors view the sweat equity factored by the founders? And what is the minimum or the maximum range for the same? That's an interesting one. When you look at the pre-money cap table, ideally what you've got to look at is when we look at the cap table, it should look like this. The most ideal cap table, if there is first time funding into the company, you should have a 10% ESOP pool out of the 100, total 100. 10% is the ESOP pool. The remaining 90% should be split up into, if there are 3 founders, the creator of the product, the marketer of the product, and the team. So the team person, if he's a CEO kind of person, does not contribute to the creator, that person should have the lowest. The creator, especially in case of a tech development startup, should have the maximum. And the person who's sort of selling the product should also be very close to the person who's creating. That's how the split should happen. Again, just to reiterate, it may not be 3 different people. One person might be creator as well as seller. So he might be having, say, 60%, and the remaining 20% or 30% can go to the person who's networking, and the remaining 10% can go to the ESOP. So it depends on what kind of startup are you looking forward to. In case you're looking at a technology heavy, then these numbers work. In case you're looking at, say, manufacturing kind of a startup, then you've got to give more to the person who's managing the team, because manufacturing requires team management more. Okay, how much one usually allocated to the core team? Any guidelines? I've already given that thing, 10% to the ESOP and remaining within the, you should look at investing in startups, which I ordinarily have about 80% to 80% of holdings to the founders. Anything below that, especially at the angel level, would then make it difficult for the startup to raise future funds, because they do not have too much capital to offer to the VC firms. 1 year cliff plus 3 year of vesting. Sunil Sapra is asking. Yes. So the most standard ESOP is a 4-year vesting with yearly cliffs, which means that the vesting gets split up into 4 years. And there are 2 methods of doing it, either 25% each 4 years, or even better. This is something that we picked up from some of the US startups. They do a increasing trend, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. So if you remain in the company for 1 year, you get 10% of the ESOPs. Second year, you get another 20%. Third year, another 30%. Fourth year, 40%. Now, this motivates the employee to remain till the end of 4th year at least. So that's.
So, Varun, why are we not, when we are locking the founder's share also for 4 years or 5 years, why are we not using this rule maybe to motivate the founders to remain for a longer time? Because many times founder leaves the company in between.
Correct. So founder leaving the company in between is primarily one point that we will cover under disputes. However, founder leaving the company generally is between, say, 2 founders, 3 founders not able to gel up together, or the investor asking that, okay, this person committed something else, not doing well.
Or the founder getting a better opportunity outside.
That's primarily, ideally, in my opinion, we've seen that all the exit doors of the founders should be locked and closed with very hard keys and bolts to make sure that he's not doing anything except running the startup for the next 4 years. So 4 years time is surely needed. If you're locking your employees ESOPs for 4 years, the founder should remain in the company for 4 years. What about families and friends round? Can it come prior to the ESOP being formed? That's an interesting question by Chandan. Families and friends round, what we see generally, there is no documentation. People just randomly give 10-20 lakh rupees to a son who's wanting to do a startup. So I think this conversation is primarily when a formal angel comes into the picture. If you are acting as a family and friend and want to invest, then I would say earlier the better. You should create the ESOP pool as soon as possible. It gives lots of motivation to the employees, also gives a clear direction to the company that next 4 years we want this company to go forward in this manner. Okay, is that a red flag? I would say this we've seen people who are not keen on creating ESOP pools. Especially we see ESOP pools in US startups who are doing really well have 20 to 30%. India generally has around 10% because again we are people who want to do things ourselves. We are poor in delegation generally. Or delegation is an art that we learn a bit later in life. That is what our observation about most startup founders are. So the earlier you do ESOPs is better. Okay, I'm simply trying to dilute the angel's share. I think this is simply trying to dilute the angel's share. Yes, Mridul is absolutely right. Generally, what these co-founders or startup founders do is that once the angel investor comes in, then they start the ESOP pool. So it results in dilution of the angel share. That should not happen. Before you step in, make sure that the 10% is there. What does the lock-in period and the exit clause means? Does that mean there is no exit before the lock-in? Can the share be transferred during the lock-in? Well, ideally speaking, that's a good question from Anil Gupta ji. I would say exit is something which should realign and sync up with your time horizon of investment. What does that mean? When you invest money, say 20 lakh rupees, 50 lakh rupees, 2 crore rupees, 5 crore rupees in a startup, you should have a certain time frame of your investment. Let's say the time frame should be at least around 3 to 5 years time, normally as an angel investor. Now, you cannot go 6 months down the line to the founder and say that, oh, what are my exit rights and how do you plan to give me an exit? So technically, there are no lock-ins, but generally there's a clear mention in the term sheet and the shareholders agreement that the exit clause should normally get triggered in about 3 to 5 years time. So make sure that you don't sort of push the startup too hard initially so that they are not able to survive even. So maybe give them some time to breathe. If the company's current revenue is 2 crores and they are quoting the current market value at 20 CR, is the valuation correct and why? I think that's a different question. We have seen even pre-money, pre-revenue making companies having a certain valuation. So I think in the new scenario, I think one of the biggest example recently is of Cred. Cred is now a unicorn and it has a revenue of 50 lakh rupees. They are spending 700 rupees to earn 1 rupee. But their model is slightly different. They are building a certain value proposition. So I think to connect, yes, there can be some nexus to the revenue versus the market market valuation. Generally, it is about 10x. So maybe in some cases 5 to 8x. Normally 8x is considered to be okay, but again, it is subjective. So let's skip that question. Okay, typically nowadays business and domain, lots of questions from you guys. Typically nowadays business and domain guys are leading the startups and hiring CTO as senior employees. Kunal Shah, Jitendra Gupta, correct, very nice. How does the CTO have equal share work? No one knows the CTO is in public domain. Okay, so CTO is a what is called as a KMP in legal parlance, which means key managerial personnel. So CTO would be getting say 5% of stocks from the ESOP pool. In that case, yes, if you are, again, as I gave you this example, if you are a very good CEO kind of person and you don't have a tech co-founder, you can hire a tech co-founder, raise funds from angel, give him a good package. In addition, give him 5% ESOPs. So the CTO may not be a co-founder, does not involve himself in the decision making of the company, but he's a relevant person in the KMP, the key managerial person to run the company. And make sure that this person, the CTO, then has at least a 4-year time period and his shares are locked for 4 years so that he stays in the company. Okay, can sweat equity shares the core team other than the founders given out as ESOPs? Assuming ESOP pool can be made higher than 10%. Okay, Chandan asking another question. Can sweat equity to the core team members given out of ESOPs? No, ESOPs cannot go out to the directors of the company. Okay, so I think I've already answered Sachin's question. Family and friends which give loans alone not properly documented, but obligations, return interest, how to unearth. Okay, so this question that family and friends giving money without any documentation, so that's the thing that I talked about. Point number 2, pre-money cap table. When you step into the startup, make sure, simply ask what is your cap table as of current date. And there should not be any this, we've seen this new person, maybe a new mama ji or a chacha ji coming into the cap table after the company is doing well or after angel investors invest, and mama ji says, oh, I had given the founder of the company 20 lakh rupees, I want that money back. So make sure that whenever you step into the company, the pre-money cap table before you is absolutely clear and there is no doubt about it. And rather, this can be a deal breaker if a new person comes into the picture and claims shares or stocks out of it. So make sure those things are there. Okay, FNF money is intended to convert to shares either by CN or SAFE or CARE. I think that's a point that we'll cover a bit later in the liquidation preference clauses. Okay, then there are general questions like how is valuation decided? I think valuation, especially in the angel rounds, is a subjective thing. Generally, there's a methodology of determining valuation. There's a registered valuation methodology, like discounted cash flows of shares. However, most of these valuations, especially at the angel round, happen based on the quality of the founders, the product that they are building, the product market fix, what they are trying to solve, whether it has a opportunity of growing further. So there are lots of variance to it. Can you explain venture debt and is it linked to getting shares in a startup not being able to pay back the debt? We'll cover that thing. We will cover. There's one question from Arjun's asking that. Can you explain venture debt? We will cover point number 5 as the first 5 points. We'll cover point number 5 as the instrument that you should ask. We'll cover that thing. Okay. Okay, let's just pick one last question. There has been some question there. Okay, what's the definition of a co-founder? I've seen people joining the company later in the co-founder title. How does that work? Okay, so co-founder primarily is a generic term. It is not a term that is defined in the Companies Act as such. Companies Act defines the term promoters or directors. So co-founders generally people. This is a term that we borrowed from the US. Co-founders primarily mean that this person is part of the core team. Now, core team primarily means that he would also have ESOPs and is part of the key decision making of the company. So from that perspective, it is important that this person is a relevant player in the core team of the company. So hence that person has to be sort of fixed in the company for the next sort of at least 4 years so that the startup is able to run. Okay, so we've covered 3 points. We'll just skip some questions for the time being. We've covered 3 points: the exit, the pre-money cap table, and the team / the ESOPs. Now, the fourth important deal breaker clause is ROFO/ROFR. What does that mean? ROFO/ROFR. It means right of first refusal or right of first offer. What does that mean? It simply means that, say, for example, you've entered into a certain startup, and this startup is now raising another round of funds, and you should be given a priority to reinvest into this company. Now, what does it mean? You invested, say, 10 lakh rupees. 6 months down the line, this startup is doing really well. Now you want to further invest. Make sure that the ROFO or the ROFR clause gives you the right to reinvest into the company before a new investor comes into the picture. Now, why is this important? This is especially important where initially you had certain skepticisms about the startup, which is okay. That is why you only invested 10 lakhs. The startup showed some results, and thereafter, now you are willing to invest more. The startup went out to some investor, and that new investor invested 2 crore rupees. However, if you have this clause, ROFO/ROFR, ROFO or ROFR, the startup is bound to come to you first so that you are willing or you are having an opportunity to invest in the company again. And only after you deny, so ROFR means right of first refusal, only after you refuse can they take funds from others. Now, why is this important? This is important in case you are bullish on your investment and you want to invest further. So that's how it works. So this is an important clause. It helps you sort of consolidate your investments and your holding in the company, especially in case of good startup deals. And the fifth point, the deal breaker, the fifth point, a deal maker or breaker, I should say. Fifth point. Fifth point is the instrument that you have to ask. Now, many startups, I've seen that, especially in the angel round, especially in families, friends round, even in seed round, they say that, okay, sir, we are offering equity shares. Equity shares is not wrong. Sir, we are offering debentures. Sir, we are offering CCPS, we preference shares. Sometimes the term sheet is not clear on what is the instrument that they are offering. As a standard protocol, you should, as a thumb rule, you should ask for CCPS. Now, what is CCPS? Compulsory convertible preference shares. Now, why is this important? This is by far the most popular instrument. Other than being popular, it has features of both the equity shares as well as preference shares. If you don't ask for CCPS and you take equity shares, there are many other rights that you cannot demand. One of the examples can be if the startup is going down and you want to recover your investment, if you have equity shares as investment instrument that you have acquired, you will not be able to have what is called as liquidation preference. Liquidation preference is not allowed in equity shares legally. So if the startup is going down and you had invested 20 lakh rupees, you want to recover 20 lakh rupees, you will not get it. Hence, CCPS is by far the best instrument that an angel investor can ask. Now, why is this best instrument? Primarily because CCPS acts both like equity shares as well as preference shares. Why am I saying equity shares? Because CCPS ultimately, because it is compulsory convertible, it ultimately in the long run has to convert into equity shares, which means you're enjoying both sides of the table. You're enjoying the upside of the equity shares as well as you're protecting yourself by way of having the preference shares. Now, there might be some questions around it. I'm happy to take up those questions. Okay, as an angel group, should we get the valuation confirmed from an external valuation agency, a consultant? That's the question from Sandeep Gupta. Yes, that is, we'll cover that point, the valuation as one of the key points. Just to summarize that thing, there is a mandatory requirement to conduct a valuation, and that valuation report has to be issued by a IBPI registered valuer. We'll cover those aspects. There are some aspects to touch upon from a Startup India perspective as well. That is one of the 15 points that I will cover today. What is generally discount given to the existing investors raising further rounds of funds? I think we've already covered that thing. 15 to 20% is a discount that we covered. Sunil is asking, what is ROFO? Okay, ROFO is a smaller or a slightly lower version of ROFR. ROFR means right of first refusal, so that the startup will come to you, and once you refuse, then they can go to the other external second investor, right? ROFO means that they will write a first offer, that they will offer you for 14 days. In case you don't answer, then they can directly go. So they don't wait for your refusal. It is slightly lower than ROFR. So you should prefer ROFR. If you don't get ROFR, at least strive for getting ROFR. Some VCs ask for OCPS. Why is this? OCPS is not a popular instrument in India. OCPS means optionally convertible preference shares. Optionally convertible means that the reason why we are fond of CCPS and why it is the most popular instrument is that CCPS helps you convert that into equity shares. So once you are having a bigger exit, you are able to convert into equity shares. However, OCPS means either you are optionally converting. Optionally converting OCPS, I would say it has restrictions. Say, for example, if you're investing in a foreign startup or you are, say, sitting in Singapore and investing in an Indian startup, OCPS will not apply. The preferred mode is CCPS only. Okay, there's one question from Sunil Sapra which asks and mentioned, but CCPS will create a waterfall. It may or may not create waterfall. There's no challenge around it. Every new VC will ask for higher preference. No, it's not that. I think it is important to note that every new incoming investor will invest and create a new document, a new shareholders agreement, which then acts supra or it overpowers the previous shareholders agreement. So make sure that whenever new shareholder agreement is created, a new investor comes into the picture, you also read the new shareholders agreement and sign it, so that you are actually giving up your rights in the old shareholders agreement and moving to the new shareholders agreement. So every new, as a standard protocol, every new shareholders agreement acts supra over the previous shareholders agreement. Okay, so the 5 points, just to summarize: deal makers, deal breakers. First, exit. Second, pre-money cap table. Third, team/ESOP. Fourth, ROFOS or ROFR. And fifth, instrument, which is CCPS. These are 5 key deal maker or breakers. Okay, now we move to the next category. Next five important clauses of the term sheet or the shareholders agreement, which in some cases can be deal makers or breakers, but they are important and you should pay attention to this. Okay. So the first point in this 5-point category is quarterly information rights. What does this mean? This means, as our observation in the last 8-9 years in this industry, we realize that you've got to think of startups, and this is one cardinal error that that angel investors make. They think of startups that, okay, I've made the investment, just like the stock market, you make the investment and then you just hold tight and you just sort of relax for 5 years, 10 years, let the investment grow. That does not happen with startups. Startups are immature. They may not have processes in place. They may not know how to go to the market. So post governance after investment becomes a very crucial action point here. So whenever you invest in a startup, every quarter, minimum every quarter, ask for three things. What is the MIS? MIS primarily means captures things like sales made, contracts signed, employees hired, how are you using my money, those kind of details. Ask for an MIS. Don't ask for a profit and loss account. We're not looking at from a financial perspective. MIS will capture much more details than a simple profit and loss account. That's one. Second, ask for what are your next 3 months plan so that you're able to match up that whatever that the startup pitched to you as an investor, is he actually achieving that thing or is he falling back on his promises? So try to reconcile what he pitched you initially versus what is he actually delivering. Now startups, since they are generally over motivated people, they generally can say that, okay sir, we've got absolutely no competition on this entire earth. This is product, this is groundbreaking technology. These kind of words we've generally heard from startups. It is good to be sort of bullish on your product, but it should also have some sanity to it. So quarterly information reports immediately after you make the investments. Small things like if you don't do a certain filing in say GST, there's a certain penalty that happens every day. And similarly, in case you don't file a form with MCA on time, there's a 100 rupee, 50 rupee penalty that happens every day. Now, these numbers can grow in case people say that they blame their CAs and lawyers stating that, oh, my CA was ill, oh, my CA was not available, and now there's a 25,000 rupee penalty, which then ultimately gets paid from the investor's money. So make sure, as a post-governance mechanism, you ask for at least quarterly information rights. This should be mentioned in the term sheet itself, that you have a right to ask for all this information, and make sure that this information is then maybe shared with some legal professional. Maybe you share this information with people who understand or is able to comprehend this information for you. So that's important. That's point number one in the 5 points that we are now discussing. Point number one is quarterly information rights. Point number two is dispute or exit of the founders. Now, dispute and exit of the founders. Now, generally we see that if there are 2 or 3 founders, maybe because of some massive opportunity that someone has got outside of the organization, or some people not able to gel together, or the investor says that, okay, this person is not working very hard and he's holding say 30% of the equity, or there's some fight between the founders. What happens in that case? Make sure that you have a right, as an investor to at least be aware and known to any such dispute. Second, one, you are aware of such dispute, or you are at least having a right to be informed about this dispute. Second, in case a founder wants to make an exit, have a clear clause on what happens to his stocks. We generally see that if you kick out the founder from the company, he is still holding the stocks and then he creates issues in the long run. So make sure that you maybe try to kick out the shareholding also. Third, what happens to those shares? Either those shares of the exiting co-founder is given to the founders in the ESOP pool, is given to the founders in the founders pool, or it is distributed to all other shareholders in their profit sharing ratio or their stakeholdings. So say, for example, if there are 3 founders, one holding say 40%, another holding 30%, and another holding 10%. That's 80%. 10% goes to the ESOP pool and 10% goes to the angel investors. Now, this person holding 10% wants to leave. This 10% should go to all these people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These people in their stakeholding ratio. That's the most logical, that's the most practical way of doing it. In some cases, these 2 founders say that, okay, we don't want to give it to the investors. We will handle it ourselves. Instead of 3 people running the show, there'll be 2 people running the show. This is an important clause, especially to define on what basis is this founder leaving. Make sure to have clauses like good lever and bad lever situations. What does that mean? Good lever means, okay, this person got a wonderful opportunity on happy terms, he's leaving. So he's selling his shares to these two people. Wonderful. In bad lever situation, you are kicking out this person because of some fraud, some wrong that he did. Maybe he got into some benefits to his family. In that case, his shares get sold to all other people in the cap table. So make sure that this clause of dispute slash founder exit is part of your term sheet as well as shareholders agreement as well.
So Varun, here I think I want to raise another point because this is coming up as an experience. We are having a tough time negotiating with one of the startups on this point.
Okay.
Practically. So let me raise the practical question here. So I think one, I agree with you. The founder is trying to get all the shares to himself, wherein he should get it to all the stakeholders in the ratio, and the guy who's getting 40% will end up will get the major chunk.
Correct.
The guy who gets 20% will get major chunk. But investors will get only 2% of the 10%, right? 10%, 10%, which is hardly 1%. So I think majority is going to founder. So that let that be the founding rule, logical and founding and fair.
That is by far the most logical.
Second information which is more important is that you have made a founder say locked in for 4 years. Okay. Let's say you have given a vesting rights, and I think going forward, I would recommend we should have in our term sheets and our work, we should have a rising vesting right, not an equal vesting right of 25% per year, maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, as you said.
Correct.
Let's agree to that in Dfan as a rule. I'm suggesting that.
They're included in your standard term sheet.
I'm suggesting that. I think people can comment and we can then agree on that. And more important is, let's take an example that let's say in third year this exit happens for one of the founders, right? Now he says I hold 20% shares, and let's say as per the current terms, 10% has been vested to me because of 2%, because of the 2 years I have completed. 25, 50% is vested. So 50% I'm going to sell at a fair market value. What about the rest 50%? I think our take there is that those 50% is gone away. They have to be bought at 10 rupees, not at the premium.
Just a moment.
Or maybe those 10% goes to the ESOP pool. Let it not go to any founder, to any investor. Let it go to ESOP pool for creation of a let the replacement founder comes in and take advantage of that.
Correct. So how it works is that, say for example, if the person is exiting in that example, 10% this person is leaving the company. Is he leaving because there was some fraudulent action which was initiated against him because of the wrongful things that he's done? In that case, there's no doubt you are just snatching the shares back from him. In that case, the transfer can happen at par value. This can be mentioned in the term sheet itself. Second, in case there's a good lever situation, in that case, the valuation for his exit can be at intrinsic value. Intrinsic value is a methodology which is defined in the Income Tax Act, and that intrinsic value shares are then distributed to all the people who are on the cap table, all the people in their stakeholding ratio. So that's a question that's been asked by Nitin, Sandeep, and Sri Ganesh as well. Can the equity of the existing founders be kept in treasury equivalent as in not allocated to anyone? In India, it is not allowed.
I think this is what I was also saying, that let it be part of the ESOP pool.
No. So in India, once the shares are issued, they cannot be transferred to a certain treasury. So either it gets transferred to the founders, other founders. So someone has to hold it. It cannot be sort of untitled. So someone has to hold it. Or in case this person is replaced by another founder, then he can transfer to the incoming founder. So that can be done, right? And what is the value of the shares at the time of exit of the founders? We've already covered that question. In case of bad lever, you're kicking him out, par value, 10 rupees per share, 1 rupees per share, whatever. In case of happy exit, he's worked well for the vested shares that he's already had. For the vested shares, he'll get intrinsic value. For the unvested share, he'll get par value or nothing. That's the no. Okay. Any other questions?
Varun, I think we one request, we need to cover this more elaborately in our term sheets and shareholder agreements going forward. I mean, let's also, I mean, people are here, let's get their view, and if they agree, I mean, let's create this as a standard. And if founder is not agreeing, we are not going ahead.
Surely, I think that's an internal call that DF Angels can take. But
I wanted to take in front of this whole group. That's why I'm raising it here.
Okay. So I think
it is in the interest of the company and interest of the founders and investors. And I think the point here is that we have to be logical and fair to everybody.
exactly correct. So you don't want to sort of a person who's been. I think there's one question, relevant question from Sandeep Agarwal ji, stating that in case of death of the co-founder or investor, who to deal with the holding pattern of the nominee, and in case of a happy leaver situation. Okay, so just to reiterate that question. So in case there's a death or incapacitation, so that has been covered in Indian law. In case the founder is incapacitated, or there's a death of the founder, his shares get sold to his or transferred to his nominee, or he can sell the shares in case the family wants the shares at intrinsic value or at that time FMV. So death is not something that we can control. So from that perspective, at least the full value of the shares should be given to the person who was initially holding the shares. So death is considered to be sort of a happy lever situation. The bad lever situation is only when there are some wrongful actions being done by the founder, and in case you are asking him or her to leave the company. In that case, there's no doubt you are just transferring the shares at par value. It is like a penalty on that person, that despite you working for your own company for 3 years, you will not get anything simply because you did some fraud or wrong in the company. That's how it works. Any nomination in case of death? Yes, of course. So the family can get shares transferred in case the family wants to take money. FMV can be paid. If the family does not want to take money, the shares can be transferred to the family. That is defined in the Indian law. There's no ambiguity around it. Okay, how is the FMV calculated? FMV is calculated. There's a methodology of calculating FMV. DCF method has been recommended amongst other 5 methods, and it is generally recommended to be done by a registered valuer under IBPI. There's a new protocol which then goes forward. There's a separate set of individuals who are registered valuers. Now, we'll also cover this point going forward in one of the points of the 15 points that we have, which is the valuation. We'll cover that point there. Okay, I think this question is a bit late. When does the CCPS get converted into equity shares? CCPS can get converted into equity shares maximum in less than 20 years. So generally, the life of CCPS is 19 years and 11 months, or it can be done anytime before 19 years and 11 months. If a startup has already issued shares to the angel investors, does it become deterrent for future rounds? No, of course, why not? If it issues shares to angel investors, the next round investors get more and more shares and the pool becomes bigger and bigger. That's it. If one of the founders wants to exit, the other founders are interested to take his stake at the value. How is this negotiated? And why would he agree to the distribution? Okay, so this is important. If there are 3 co-founders, one wants to leave. So if other 2 founders have enough money in their personal bank to pay this co-founder to make an exit, then it is fine. Otherwise, even angel investors or all other investors would be willing to take up shares in their current shareholding proportion. Generally, that is how it should work. Okay, let's move on to the next one then. Okay, so in this category of 5 points, we discuss about quarterly information rights. We discuss about disputes and founder exits. The third point in this 5 category is tag along. Tag along, what does that mean? Tag along means you invested in a startup. The startup was running quite well. The founder was having some discussion with some random person. And this random person said, oh, wow, wonderful. I don't want to invest in your company, but I can purchase your shares. So founder says that, okay, I'm selling some portion of my shares to an external investor. Now, in this case, the angel investor might think that, okay, founder is able to sell off, say, 2% and make 20 lakh rupees. Why am I sitting in the cap table and my funds are locked or they are illiquid? In that case, make sure that you have the clause called tag along, which means that you, as the angel investor, if the founder is selling some part of their shares, you also have a right to sell some part of your shares, and you get what is called as tag along with the founder. So just to have a practical example on this, let's say that you are an angel investor. A founder is holding, say, 40%. One of the founders is holding 40%. His NRI uncle says that, okay, out of the 40%, can you sell 5% of your shares to me? We are not talking about a primary investment into the company. We are talking about founder selling 5% to his NRI uncle. In that case, you as an angel investor will have a right, in case the tag along clause is there, you will say that I will also sell proportionate to this NRI uncle so that I also make some liquidity gains for myself. Whether you actually do it or not, that's totally your call, but at least you should have a tag along right. So this is an important clause, especially to give you these small liquidity events. You are able to sell off some small portions of your investments. And this is important. Why? Because if the founder is selling his shares, it's an indirect indication of two things. Founder is selling his shares, indirect indication of two things. One, either the company is starting to do bad. That is why he's slowly exiting the company. So you also want to get yourself tagged along. Or the startup founder, just because maybe he's getting married or he's having certain expenses, in that case, if he's selling his minority stock to someone, why is it that this someone is not directly investing into the company and is wanting the share from secondary buys from the founder? So you don't want any founder to get into these private deals with anyone without informing you. Hence, it is important that you should have a clear clause of tag along in case founder wants to create liquidity for his own personal self without creating liquidity for other people in the captive. So make sure that the tag along clause is clear. It should give you a clear right to give you tag along rights in case the founder is exiting. Okay. Selling to secondary market as part of the tag along rights. Yes, we are talking about secondary markets only. Yes, tag alongs happen in the secondary markets only. Okay, so we've covered 3 points. We've covered quarterly information rights. We've covered the disputes and the founder's exit. We've covered tag. Now, the fourth important point in this category is liquidation preference. Now, what is liquidation preference? Liquidation preference primarily means that, and this is important because of the earlier clause that I talked about, CCPS. CCPS, in case you don't get CCPS, you don't get liquidation preference. In case the founder offers you, the startup offers you equity shares, you don't get liquidation preference. So this clause happens only when you take CCPS in the earlier clause that we discussed. Okay. So liquidation preference primarily means that in case the startup is not doing well, it's going down in one situation, you at least get an opportunity to recover your capital amount. That is liquidation preference. Second situation, the company is getting sold to a bigger VC firm or it's getting sold to a bigger competitor for say 500 crores. In that case, a 1x liquidation preference means that, say, for example, if you have invested 1 crore rupees, so you will get 1 crore rupees back first. And then out of the 500 crore rupees, you take 1 crore rupees. The remaining 499 crore rupees gets distributed in the shareholding pattern ratio. Now, what this means is that 1x means is that your capital remains intact. Now, this clause, I did not include liquidation preference in the first 5 deal maker or breaker clauses simply because it is not a mandatory clause. It is a recommendatory clause because some founders are not comfortable giving you an assurance of 1x in case the company is going down. So this depends on negotiations. This depends on you being able to convince the founder to give you the liquidation preference. And it also depends on the fact that the founder should be confident that, okay, if I go big 500 crore rupees, then giving 1 crore rupees back as capital back to you is no big deal. So if a founder is skeptical about giving you liquidation preference, it means that he's not very confident of selling his company at a bigger stage. Now, this may or may not be the right approach to thinking. Generally, people think that, okay, what if my company goes down? Do I still have to return your 1 crore rupees? No, it is not a debenture. It is not a debt. You are getting CCPS. But it goes to show the mindset or the psyche of the founder, that is he looking at his startup going big or is he looking at his startup going down? So it is, I would not say a deal maker or breaker, but it is a relevant clause. Liquidation preference assures your capital in case of bad days, and it gives you the capital returns in case of good days. So this was the fourth clause that we discussed. And the fifth and the final clause. Okay, there's a question. Why can't investor insist for drag along also? Okay, let's cover this point as well. when I say tag along and I say liquidation preference, why not drag along? Personally speaking, I'm not very fond of drag along clauses, but let's discuss this thing. Drag along primarily means that you know that the company, the startup is about to go down. When you know that the company or the startup is about to go down, or you're waiting for the company, okay, it's been 3 years, it's been 5 years, it's been 6 years, and you're not able to get an exit on your investments. Hence, I stated that it's important to have the exit clause very clear. In this case, what you do out of frustration, as an angel investor, you're frustrated of your investment. So what you do is that you find an investor and you sell off your shares at whatever value to that investor, and you also force all other founders, all other people to get dragged along with you. What this means is that this is your last chance of recovering your investment. I feel that if you're reaching this stage, you should have negotiated better off for the exit clause, and you should have negotiated better for the liquidation preferences. Okay. There are some other questions like, can you explain the clawback clauses as well? Okay, clawback like technical. We'll cover that thing. There is need the okay. This is needed. The founder is not managing the show well. Investor is keen to sell and find a buyer. Okay, fine enough. Yes. So just to cover and complete that aspect, how it works is that there might be a case where the startup is doing reasonably well, but it is not doing massively well to give you a 2x, 5x, 20x, 100x return. So in that case, what you do is that you as an angel investor find a new investor who is willing to purchase your shares. And then you also force all other people to forcibly sell their shares to the incoming investor. This is primarily a methodology to recover your investment and make some gains, or at least not have a loss in your investment. Okay, now we covered the fifth and the final point in, as I recode 15 points, we've already covered the 5 points. We are covering the second aspect of 5 points, the last point. Just to revise, quarterly information rights, dispute and founder exit, tag along, liquidation preference, and this clause is secondary sale. Now, secondary sale, you should have a clear clause in your term sheet for secondary sale. What does this mean? It simply means that if you have invested in angel round, seed round, if a series A or series B happens, you should have a clear clause that you should have a right to talk to that new big incoming investor coming into the company in the cap table to make sure that you are able to make an exit. We discussed this point earlier as well. New investment coming in at 100 crore rupees, secondary, that you selling your shares to an incoming bigger investor at say 80 crores, 85 crore rupees. This creates an exit for you simply because, as I observe, most of these angel investors, they do not wait till the IPO stage. So generally, angel investors investing about 10, 20, 50 lakh rupees have a time horizon of about 3 to 5 years time. So in 3 to 5 years time, if there are subsequent fundraisers round, make sure that you talk to these incoming investors and try for an exit in case you are happy with, say, 10x exit, 20x exit. In case you want to stay in the cap table, wonderful. But at least an opportunity of exit should be there. Okay, there are some questions. Drag along and clawback, what is the difference? Yes, there's a difference. We'll cover that thing. In case of negative situation, can an investor do a private deal and sell its shares only? If yes, what clause allows to do so? Okay, in case of a negative situation, investors' shares generally, you can go forward and sell your shares, except to a competitor. You can sell off your shares to any person as long as you're okay with it. Given the fact that all startups are private limited companies, you cannot just randomly sell your shares. You should be at least informing the company, but it does not stop you from selling your shares to any other person. Make sure that once you sell your shares, those shares transfers are recorded by the company, because private limited company, it is not shares are not easily transferable. So in case you are getting an exit and you're selling your shares to maybe another friend of yours or another investor, that is covered in a form called SH4, which is a share transfer form, and you take a copy of that form, you sign it as a seller, the other person signs it as a buyer, and both of you go to the company, write a letter to the company that we've done this transaction, and please take SH4 form on record. That's the formal process.
And Varun, what if company refuses to transfer?
Okay, what if the company refuses to transfer? Ideally, the company can refuse to transfer only in a limited set of cases where you are either transferring it to a competitor or you have transferred it at such low valuation that it can spoil the current primary valuation of the company. In that case, you've got to come up with a justification of your valuation, that you got a valuation done from a registered valuer or a chartered accountant, preferably a registered valuer only. From that sense, once you've done the deal, ideally the promoters of the company can only take it on record. They cannot question the valuation or the methodology of you selling it, you selling your shares to the others.
Thank you, Varun. Yeah.
Okay, so there are a few questions. Key difference between tag along and secondary sale. Need more clarity? Yes, sure. Tag along primarily means that the founder is selling some portion of his shares to a person, third person. And you also say that, okay, oh, founder is selling, I also want to sell it, right? I would say tag along is one example of a secondary sale. So secondary sale is a bigger term and tag along is one aspect of a secondary sale. Okay. I guess Milk Basket was an example. What if the company is registered outside India but operating in India, raising funds from India and other markets? I guess Milk Basket was an example with Kalari selling its shares. Can a company refuse to register SH4? Is that right? Ideally, I already answered that. SH4 ideally cannot be refused unless and until it is executed with a competitor. Okay, there was this difference that you were talking about. There was one question. Okay, what if the company is registered outside India but operating in India and raising funds from India and other markets? Normally, if the company is registered outside India, the Indian authorities would want that company to be registered in India as well. If your question was pertaining to the valuation of the fundraising happening outside India, whereas the company is registered as an operating entity in India, you should ideally as an investor invest in a company where the real IP valuation cap table is there. You should not invest in case there are sort of multi structures like most of my YC Combinator Y Combinator clients are. So they have a US Delaware C Corp and they have an Indian company. In that case, always prefer investing in the US C Corp. Why? Because the valuation is there. It is recommended that you invest there. If the founder is selling his shares, does he need to inform the other investors before doing so? Yes, of course, it is needed, mandatory. Yes, he cannot. Founders selling his shares is an important activity. If he does not inform the investors, how the investors tag along his shares to them? Okay, is there something called SAFE? Okay, SAFE is a concept which is not applicable in India. It is applicable to US startups. It is called Simple Agreement for Future Equity, SAFE notes. This is a concept which has started in the US again from Y Combinator only, which means that you accept the money today and you allot the shares later on based on some conditions. Those things don't work currently in India. In India, there's a mandatory requirement that once you receive the funds, within 60 days time, you have to allot the shares. So in case if the question was pertaining to if you're investing in a US company, then yes, you should be signatory to a SAFE note, wherein you should have a clear understanding as to when you will get the shares.
Varun, here, one confusion about safe notes is that the concept has been brought in India by 100x VC and few other VCs.
I know, of course, about.
And I think what needs a clarification, as you rightly said.
Yes,
that
I know about Sanjay Mehta. I know about Sanjay Mehta and 100x VC. So I know how they work. So let me discuss about that aspect.
I think you covered one aspect, that current law of the land in India says you have to issue shares in 60 days. I think that explains everything. That explains that safe note is not legally.
No, so let me. I understand. I understand that Sanjay Mehta's 100x.vc is offering, especially on their website, they call it iSafe. And ideally speaking, we had a conversation. We know 100x VC. I had a conversation with their tech team. What they are calling, it's just a stylish name, iSafe. Technically, at the end of it, it is a CCPS only. So once you go into those details, it is a CCPS instrument. It is not.
Thanks for clarification, because there's a lot of perception made.
No.
Thanks for. So it is a CCPS end of the day.
It is from a legal perspective, it's only a CCPS. In India, there is currently no concept of you accepting money. So if I'm a startup founder, I accept money from the angel investor, I have to allot shares. PAS3 form filing, PAS3 form filing is mandatory in India for allotment of shares. You cannot take the money and then keep the money open. In case rather there are opposing clauses. In case you use the money before allotment, then it is an offense. wherein you are liable to return the money as well. So make sure that in case you are investing, make sure that you get the share certificate in time. Make sure that the company goes forward and files PAS3 form. The 100x VC, I think they just got inspired by the Y Combinator Safe. That concept is currently not in India. I say the concept that they are talking, it's just a marketing word for CCP.
So, Varun, Harvinder here. So, in case of this 100x.vc, so if they are saying iSafe, so in that case, they are also taking equity shares within 60 days?
They are offering you, they are calling the term as iSafe, but they have to go forward and allot the shares under CCPS only. The government filing, once you file the form with the government, there's a drop down tab. That in that drop down there is nothing called safe. You have to select CCPS only. So there's no
and they're also when they're signing this iSafe document with the startup 100x.vc, I'm not sure whether they're actually even signing that document anymore, or it was just in terms of publicity.
So I think what they are mentioning in their term sheet is an iSafe. However, once the shareholders agreement is created and the government filings are done, the government filings are done as CCPS only.
So government filing is done only in the next round in that case, or do they take money and they do it right now?
It has to happen in 60 days.
And within 60 days, they are taking the shares and converting it into shares.
It has to happen.
Yeah. So for all practical purpose.
Yes.
Yeah,
So let me clarify that as well.
Yeah.
So the law says within 60 days time, in case you don't file the PAS3 form on the 61st day, you are given another 15 days time to either allot with some late filing fees, or you've got to return the money with 18% interest, or in case you don't do that, then there's a penalty on the founders as well as the company, in addition to returning of the funds.
Okay, so that seems to be some wrong publicity done for with iSafe in that case completely.
Yes, I would say, I mean, again, so people, especially we see these Hyderabad and Bangalore based technology companies, since they raise funds from US VCs, and US VCs started using the word safe notes, and that word got copied in the Indian term sheets as well. Because of that, people now know about safe notes in India. Even in our US clients, we use safe notes. However, purely for Indian fundraisers, there's no concept of safe.
Okay, thanks. That's a great clarification.
No problem. Okay, so just to summarize the 5 points that we discussed.
Varun, sorry, what?
Yes.
What does SAFE expand as? It's sample agreement for fair equity, is it? Is that what it is?
SAFE stands for Simple Agreement for Future Equity, which means it is an agreement which then gives you a right, or it is an obligation on the startup for allotting you equity shares at a future date. That future date is then defined in the term sheet itself. However, that is a sort of a brainchild of Y Combinator in US. It is not yet in India. Even in Singapore, for that matter, there's no concept of safe. You've got to allot the shares. Even Mauritius follows that methodology. Australia follows that methodology. Right.
Varun, this Jitendra here. I just wanted to understand if the filing is required for all the 5 instruments you have mentioned, or it is required only for equity shares.
So filing in India is required. So I mentioned about only one key instrument, that is the CCPS. But in case you're not able to convince your startup to allot CCPS, and that startup allots you equity shares or even debentures, or maybe OCPS, any other instrument, in India, the allotment has to happen in 60 days time. Otherwise, the money has to be returned or has to be paid with interest. There's no.
Varun, one quick question about this clawback. My query was normally when there is a fraud happening, there is a clawback provision for bonuses and other salaries being paid out to the founders. So if they are indulging any suspicious or corrupt activities, we can claw back their bonuses. Is that what you are referring?
No, there's more to it. Let's discuss the clawback clause also. Now, clawback clause. Let me answer that first, then we'll take the next question. Okay, so the clawback clause generally is not a very popular clause in India. Why? Because generally, how clawback works, again, it is an extrapolation and a copy from the US term sheets only. How clawback works is that clawback clause is when a certain activity or an action happens, which can be maybe a fraud by the founder. In that case, you ask them to roll back each and every activity or each and every benefit that that person has derived. That's one. And in that case, you will also ask for your equity, which is diluted. So say, for example, if a new investor comes into the picture, and this new investor comes into the picture at a certain higher valuation. However, you were fooled as an angel investor because the valuation was lower and some wrongful filings were done, or there was a hidden fact which was not exposed to you. Based on that, there is some damage either to your stakeholding in the company, or there's some undue benefits that have been derived or withdrawn by the founders by way of extra bonuses, extra salaries. Maybe he hired his own uncle ji or mama ji or chacha ji or whatever to give some contracts to them. In that case, you roll back all these things to set as if no wrong was happening. This is the overall sort of definition of clawback, which means that you claw back the situation to the situation prior to the wrong or the fraud that happens. Ideally, if that is the case, then we are looking at say filing a civil or a criminal suit against the founders and recovering. That is why exits, drag-alongs, and all those things happen. You say that, okay, we want to kick out this founder who's done the wrong, and hence we covered that aspect, dispute and exit of the founders. Right.
Yeah, Varun,
well done, yeah. It's well explained.
So, Varun, Sunil, are you saying that getting shares or equity at a discount to the next round is not possible in India?
Equities at discount
to the next round. So, I invested, say, 10 lakhs and the value of the shares is not clear, but whatever the next round of angel or whatever or venture capital is there, I'll get a 30% discount, and it has to happen within 6 months or a value is given to it.
No. So, okay. Got that point. Okay. So how it works is that these are conditional offers. So how it works is that, say, for example, sometimes you as an angel investor in the startup are not able to agree on a certain valuation, right? So you say that, okay, let's do a floor and a ceiling valuation. What does a floor and a ceiling mean? You set up some conditions. Let's say you set up a condition like, if you are able to hit a sales of 1 crore rupees, then the valuation is set 20 crore rupees. In case you are not able to hit a revenue of 1 crore rupees, then the valuation is 10 crore rupees, right? So there's an upper limit to the valuation, 20 crores, and a lower limit to the valuation, 10 crores. So how it happens is that you put in 50 lakh rupees into the company, and then you wait for, say, 6 months time. And in 6 months time, the revenue of the company was 2 crore rupees. Since it is 2 crore rupees, now the valuation of the company is then agreed to be 20 crores. So you will get shares 50 lakhs divided by 20 crores. That's one method. In case they are not able to hit that value of revenue of 1 crore rupees, in that case, what will happen is that you will then get shares at a valuation of 10 crore rupees. How this is captured in the document is that you will clearly mention the valuation could not be determined as of date. However, still in 60 days time, the filings have to be done. How the filings are done in this case slightly more complicated. Just to sort of summarize it, you do valuation on 20 crore rupees, that is the ceiling. And in case ultimately the valuation is agreed at 10 crore rupees, you get additional shares because the conditions were not met. So in any case, you get additional shares on the presumption that the actual valuation was 10 crore rupees at the end of the day.
Got it. Thanks.
Varun Harvinder here. So in all convertible notes, wherever these kind of conditions are there, the shares are issued upfront, you are saying, within 60 days based on the higher cap of the valuation. So shares are still issued, right?
Because the rule is that in case this instrument is CCPS, the allotment has to happen. Actually, there's some sort of challenge in law, because, say, for example, RBI has come up with this notification stating that you can issue compulsory convertible notes, right?
Yeah.
However, MCA says, Companies Act says that you've got to make the allotment. So the person who's filing it has to reconcile both the laws together. So the conservative methodology is that you go forward, use the higher ceiling valuation, allot the shares in case the valuation is either 20 crores or 10 crores. If it is 20 crores, the number of shares are correct. If it is 10 crores, then you get additional shares. That's how it happens. There's no other way.
So shares are actually allocated even in convertible note.
Yes.
Upfront, right? Within 60 days.
As if the instrument is CCPS, even if there is conditional valuation, the shares have to be issued in 60 days.
Okay.
So, but CCPS, the tenure is, say, 5 years. Then it will be issued after 5 years, no? Not immediately.
No. CCPS has a tenure. The law says the maximum tenure is 19 years and 11 months. It has to be less than 20 years, right? the terms that you read, 5 years and all. So the law says it can be maximum 19 years and 11 months. If it is 5 years, if it is 3 years, it can be 8 years. It's totally flexible up to you. I think you picked up a term sheet which mentioned about 5 years, and hence the query 5 years.
No, just like that. Yes, exactly.
It can be 3 years also. It can be 8 years. It's just between what the angel investor.
It can be 3 months. It can be 3 months or 3 days also.
It can be 3 months, but the effort of then, if suppose
3 days may not justify.
Very hypothetically.
Yes.
So, okay, so can there be a convertible note, compulsory convertible note without an upper cap?
Can there be a compulsory convertible note without the upper cap? Then
because in that case, how will they calculate the?
That is an incomplete question, because if it does not have so it should have two things. One, a conversion condition. So that condition can be anything. That condition can be, it gets converted in 1 year's time. It gets converted if you are able to hit 1 crore of sale. It gets converted if you get hire 50 people. It gets converted if you get, say, 2 million downloads in your app. It can be any condition.
Yeah, any condition, but that condition links to an upper cap of the valuation.
It has to have a floor and a ceiling valuation. Right.
Because I think I remember one startup coming to us actually without an upper cap. So I was just wondering around that.
Varun, one thing basically that this is Rajesh here, right to issue, right sharing issue or CCPS, which one is better?
No. Can you repeat that question again?
So, right issue or private placement?
Okay, rights issue and private placement. Okay. So good. We did not plan to cover that point. Good that you brought that up. Okay, rights issue and private placement. Technically, you as an investor, you cannot have a call on that thing because it is the decision of the founders. However, you can surely recommend that you should go forward with rights issue. There are 2-3 benefits around it. What are the benefits? Private placement is governed by Section 42 of the Companies Act. And Section 42 proviso mentions that in case the founders do some inconsistencies not as in wrongful things, but suppose you missed passing a board resolution, you missed filing MGT 14, any misses in the compliances results in a scary 2 crore rupee penalty. So initially the law was, it was either 2 crores or fundraise, whichever is higher. Now the law has been changed, 2 crores or funding amount, whichever is lower. So think about it this way, that in case you invest 50 lakh rupees and you do a private placement of shares, the private placement is slightly more technical, requires more documentation, PAS 4, PAS 5 filing, those kind of things. It is generally recommended for bigger rounds. At angel investment rounds, seed investment, anything before Series A, we generally recommend that you go forward only with rights issue, Section 62 of the Companies Act. Section 42 has sort of more deeper, stricter penalties. Section 62 is sort of more lighter. The end result is same for both the sections, but rights issue is slightly better.
Anything better for the founder or the investor, basically, from which one is better for the investor?
So from the investor's perspective, both methodologies result in you getting the shares. Your only objective is to get a share certificate. How you get the share certificate is sort of none of your concern. Now, from an investor, since I've been on the other side of the table as well, startups, we generally don't recommend unless and until it's a Series A or a bigger VC fund coming into the picture. Angel investors for seed rounds or angel rounds, we generally don't recommend private placement. Because you do one error and then 50 lakh rupees of penalty, you get a notice from MCA, that's not really good. Right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we move on to the last 5 points, which may not be deal breakers, but these are points that you should know. And the first point, I think more or less we've covered that point, is valuation.
Just one sec, Varun. Can you just summarize which of all the 5? Because I have only 4. Yeah.
Okay, so I can summarize the 10 points that we've covered till now. The 5 points for deal making or breaking was: first, exit clause; second, pre-money cap table; third, team/ESOPs; fourth, ROFO/ROFR; and fifth, the instrument, which is CCPS. These are the 5 deal maker or breakers. Next 5, which are sort of can be deal maker or breakers in some cases, is 1, quarterly information rights; second, disputes your founder exit; third, tag along; fourth, liquidation preference; and fifth, secondary sales. So these are the 10 points. Now we move on to the 11th point out of the total 15 points. 11th point is Valuation. Now, valuation generally, I think there was a question earlier to us as well. How do you do the valuation? In most of the cases, you will find valuation being done primarily based on negotiations. However, yes, there's a legal mechanism to it as well, but discounted cash flow mechanism is by far the most popular methodology. I think this query, currently we are not discussing about what should be the value. The point is, you as an angel investor should ensure two things from valuation perspective. Whenever you invest in a startup, that startup should be a private limited company, should not be a LLP or a registered or unregistered firm. Private limited company, then make sure that you cover two aspects. One, it should be a private limited company registered under Startup India Action Plan. Now, why is this important? The Startup India Action Plan stated that in case a startup is registered, and it is free of cost registration, very simple, online, this registration will then ensure that the government stated that we will not get or not question the valuation that is done by startups that go under the Startup India Action Plan. I'll give you an example. There was this startup Bangalore-based called Travel Khana, which was also angel funded by ex-CFO of Infosys, TVS Mohandas Spicer. And this person got notices on his valuation questioning how did you value the company, those challenges. Thereby, he got a notice and he had to sort of shut down the company. There were massive challenges around it. So Startup India Action Plan, make sure that prior to your investment, the company should have a Startup India Action Plan certificate, Startup India certificate. It's free of cost, online. You just have to submit your business model summary and that's it. Second, in case of valuation, do also ask, I'm not discussing about what should be the valuation. It can be any valuation, but do also ask, how are you valuing this thing? Technically speaking, the valuation should be supported in case the valuation is bigger in number and you feel that, okay, there are multiple people. Just for safeguarding the rights, get the valuation certified by a registered valuer. Who are these registered valuers? These are chartered accountants, company secretaries who have a separate registered valuer certificate. Earlier, the law stated that any chartered accountant with 10 years of experience can do the valuation. Investment bankers can do the valuation. Now the law has been updated. It mentions registered valuer will be considered as doing the valuation. So do consider getting a registered valuer certificate. Again, if you get the Startup India certificate, registered valuer certificate becomes lesser important for smaller rounds. Going forward for bigger rounds, obviously we take registered valuer certificates. However, Startup India certificate is a mandatory thing. It helps startups also, and thereby it is your money that is there in the startup. It helps lots of benefits that can be drawn in Startup India certificate. There's a wrong notion. Many angel investors think that getting the Startup India certificate results in tax benefits to the startup. That's a separate certificate. That's an additional certificate. So this is a free of cost certificate that you get. Make sure that wherever you are investing, that thing gets a Startup India certificate. What if the entity is LLP registered under Startup India? Are angel investments possible? LLP registered under Startup India, they can get Startup India certificate. However, angel investments ideally should not happen in LLPs. Why? Because LLPs do not issue shares. So there is no concept of escalation in your price valuation and all that stuff. Get a private limited company only. That's the thing. Okay, so this is point number 11 out of the 15 points that we are discussing. We are at the last 5 points, valuation. Second, board observer or board or a director, investor director. Now, what is a board observer? Board observer is something which is important, especially as a post-investment governance mechanism. What does this mean? We discuss about quarterly information reports, and every quarter you have a right to sort of take inputs, take updates, MIS, profit and loss statements. We discuss about those things. Now, board observer primarily means that in case there are lots of investors, especially like this point we included because of DF angels, 50 people investing in a startup. So 50 people asking all these details to the investor or rather to the founder, that can you give us MIS, can you give us profit loss account, will sort of blow up the mind of the founders. So you 50 people get together, appoint one board observer. Who is a board observer? Board observer is a person which is not defined in Indian law. However, it simply means a person who sits, attends the board meeting, makes notes of those board observations, and gives all these updates to the investor. It's like a representative of the investor. Board observer does not have voting rights. He cannot take or participate anything in the decision-making mechanism. However, it is very much important that this board observer gives real-time insights to the investors about what is going on internally in the company. So board observer, especially when you're investing as a group, make sure that one person becomes a board observer. Also, it does not result in exhaustion of the board seat, which means that you are not appointing a director in the company, which simply means that a board observer is a very light position. It does not require any filing. It does not require DIR 12 to be filed with the MCA. However, a board observer is one method of protecting the right of a group of people who may be busy in their own lives to jointly invest in the company, and then they get all these updates from the board observer. So we've seen companies or groups, angel groups, who are able to appoint a board observer. They are able to get they are able to help also the startup or the founders to in case they're facing some challenges, they are able to give some insights and all. So it's like win-win, help on both sides. So
Varun, as you said, board observer is not mentioned in the law. Yes. So how to ensure that the founder invites board observer in all board meetings, because founders tends to overlook all these things?
Correct. So during the current COVID period, what you can do is that all board meetings are mandatory. They require a notice to be sent out before the board meetings are held. So you can mention in your term sheet that a board observer should be a recipient of all the notices to the board meeting, and any board meeting that happens without the notice being issued to the board observer that the meeting is about to be conducted will be considered as invalid. So that way you are able to protect your rights.
So then can we ensure, I mean, let's say let's a scenario that the founders did not intimate the observer and they just had a board meeting, and can we take and it is covered in the SHA, so can the investors take them to court of law saying that you nullify this meeting because you have not informed?
Yes, that's possible. Why? Because in case you capture this thing in the shareholders agreement that a board observer is a mandatory participant to the quorum of the board meeting. In that case, if the quorum is not formed, the meeting can be considered to be invalid.
Okay. And here, I think we found some reluctance on the founders to
yes,
so how to deal with, so one is that there are practical laws, and second is there are practical issues, negotiations, because the founders in India wants money, but they don't want to give away their rights. They want to protect themselves. They don't consider value of the money investors bringing in. They consider their holding to the equity is more, I mean, they're very emotional on that aspect. So how to manage those in the negotiations?
I think, see, in case you can go forward, how to negotiate in this case can be that you go forward and say that, okay, we want a board seat. And obviously they'll say that you're an angel investor, we cannot offer a board seat, we offer a board seat to a Series A person. Then you can say that, okay, fine enough, in case you're not willing to give a board seat.
So it's okay, they're offering board observer.
So
they're offering board observer, but they also know that it is something which is not covered in law. So how to plug that scenario? I think that's all I'm talking about.
Ideally, you've got to explain the benefits of a board observer. Board observer technically is not a person who can vote. So ideally, you can simply say that we are not poking into your decision. However, the investor, say for example, angel investors, even the DF angel group, they are people who are already having their corporate jobs, right? So you cannot go into the operational or day-to-day aspects of the company. However, if the board observer attends 3-4 meetings in say 1-2 months, you are able to then take inputs from the board observer, then on quarterly basis get the MIS, reconcile whether these things are in sync or not.
So this is a lot of effort on the part of board observer. I mean, who should be paid for his time and is invested in these activities? I mean, the startup should pay for this time, or the angel investor should pay for his time? Because it takes a lot of bandwidth of a board observer as well.
See, that's right. So board observer, ideally, it would be difficult unless it is previously agreed with the startups that the board observer would be participant. As long as the meetings are online and virtual, yes, there is time consumption on the part of the board observer also. Alternatively, if you feel that, okay, you look at the agenda of the meeting, that, okay, there are some internal discussions going on. It is not something that a board observer should invest time. So you can demand for the recording of the meetings. The Companies Act today allows virtual meetings to be done. So you can have maybe save your time, get a recording of the meeting. However, for important meetings like say adoption of the ESOP policy, hiring of a CTO, adoption of the financials of the business, opening up a new branch of the company, those kind of decisions, of course, the board observer should be participant.
No, I think I'm raising a concern here, which I think we haven't thought of, that there's going to be a good bandwidth invested by a board observer. It would be half a day to 2-3 days effort that he's going to invest before attending a board meeting, doing some preparation, attending it, and post attendance. How is he going to be compensated is the question.
Okay.
It has to be compensated either by the company or by the investors, right?
Yes, I think that's a negotiation that should happen between the board observers, angel network versus the company. I think both of them can be 50-50. That is something that can be agreed upon.
Sure.
Just like directors get their sitting fees, similarly agreements can be.
So I think that's what I'm hinting at, that if directors are getting a sitting fee, the board observer should also get a sitting fee from the company.
Yes, but sitting fees are minor. So yes, that can be done. Okay.
But the board observer doesn't have the liability of the director.
No, it does not, of course. Board observer, since he does not.
Part of sitting fees is the directors is the liability also, which is there.
Correct. That's right. That's right. Absolutely. So I would then that is the reason why we are saying that the angel investors network would cover some aspect of it. That is, if the board observer has to be paid, say 10,000 rupees or 5,000 rupees per meeting, maybe 2,500 can be agreed upon by the angel investors, and the can be done by the company. Right, but that's totally a negotiation. There's no thing that there's no recommendation from the Companies Act from this perspective, right? It's totally a observation or a negotiation between the thing. Okay, now we move on to the last three aspects of the 15-point mechanism. The last three aspects, the third last is intellectual property. Now, intellectual property, I did not cover it as a deal maker or breaker, especially in angel rounds. It is surely a deal maker or breaker in Series A round. Why is it that it is there but not very important? Simply because we generally see younger companies, companies which are 6 months old, 1 year old. In that case, what happens is that founders might be doing something. Maybe a technology founder might be doing writing some codes, having a website, and all those intellectual properties in the personal name. And then two founders got together, constructed a company, and they forgot transferring the IP from their personal name, website, codes, domains, source codes to the company. So make sure to execute what is called as an intellectual property assignment agreement. The intellectual property assignment agreement is a very simple document stating that once the company is formed, where the angel investor is investing, all the IP now rests with the company, so that tomorrow, if you, for whatever reason, kick out the founder, the IP does not go along with the founder. So make sure that clause is there. Especially in Series A rounds, a deeper check on the intellectual property, copyrights, and those things are done, patents are done. However, for angel investors, generally those startups may not have patents, may not have other registered trademarks around. Given the fact that there's another benefit, I mentioned about Startup India. Startup India, any private limited company which is registered in Startup India gets a 50% discount on government fees for filing IPs. So any intellectual property that they submit, like trademarks, the government fees is 10,000, gets reduced to 5,000. So there are some benefits around it. So from that perspective, yes, what you've got to do is that make sure that the intellectual property is assigned from these individual founders to the company. That's an important point. Okay. The second last point is the fees. Now, why this point is picked up? Because we've seen in some observations that the startup goes to multiple angel networks, multiple investors, and all these investors conduct due diligences. And because of these due diligences, there might be a case where the due diligence was done and then the investment did not happen. And then maybe 1 month down the line, the startup receives a bill from a lawyer or a CA stating that, okay, the due diligence was done and my fees is due. And this startup founder's taken aback that, well, the investment did not happen, it should be paid by the angel network. It creates some challenges around it. So make sure in the term sheet, you mention clearly that the cost of running a due diligence, financial due diligence, legal due diligence, all those aspects are either covered by the company or by the angel network. That thing is very clear. One easier method is that you can say that, okay, if the investment goes through, then the startup pays. If the investment does not go through, then maybe you can share some cost. And finally, the last point, and this is important. Might be a small point, but we've made some observations around it. So generally, angel investors invest lots of time in negotiating a term sheet. And the term sheet covers all these 15 points that I covered. However, once the term sheet is agreed and signed, as I mentioned, it is a non-binding agreement. Since it is a non-binding agreement, one thing happens is that you take the term sheet, you go to a lawyer, and you send across this document to a lawyer. And then the lawyer reads the term sheet, and then he starts drafting the shareholders agreement. We have seen in many cases that the sense of the term sheet is not captured in the shareholders agreement, or there are multiple term sheets that are then centralized in the shareholders agreement, which then results in conflicting rights between one term sheet and another term sheet at the same time, right? So make sure that while whatever that you've agreed on the term sheet also has been captured in the shareholders agreement, because once the shareholders agreement is signed, the term sheet does not hold any value. So you might have agreed on, say, a liquidation preference of 1x in your term sheet, but later on you realize in the shareholders agreement that the lawyer missed out writing 1x of the liquidation preference in the shareholders agreement. In that case, you will not be able to go back to the founder and claim your 1x liquidation preference. Hence, it is important that the shareholders agreement read that shareholders agreement properly. And as I also mentioned, every new shareholders agreement is acting supra over the previous shareholders agreement, which means that you sign a certain shareholders agreement, the next investor who comes in will ask you to sign the new shareholders agreement. Make sure of one important thing: whatever rights, responsibilities that you had in your version of the shareholders agreement, in the Series A round, all those rights have carried over. This error is also made by lots of lawyers. They don't read the previous shareholders agreement. Because of that, they create a newer version, and the old angel investors get stuck in the cap table. They are not able to make an exit. That is important, that extrapolation, the last point, extrapolation or the transfer of rights from the term sheet to a shareholders agreement, or from one shareholders agreement to another shareholders agreement, that has to be captured very properly. So that was the last point. So
Varun, one question here. The shareholder agreement from previous investors, they also signed the new shareholder agreement as well?
Yes. So a shareholders agreement generally acts supra over all previous shareholders agreement, which primarily means that a new shareholders agreement will overpower the previous shareholders agreement, which means that you have to sign the new shareholders agreement. So read the new shareholders agreement properly to ensure that, say, for example, the new shareholders agreement mentions 0.5x liquidation preference. It means that you are being downgraded from 1x liquidation preference to 0.5x. So make sure.
Do we have a right? Do the existing shareholder have a right to refuse to sign in case he does not agree to the terms?
Of course, absolutely. So you, as a shareholder of a company and a minority shareholder of the company, your rights cannot be downgraded.
Sure.
Unless and until you also agree to sign on the new shareholders agreement. So people just randomly sign it. So make sure that any new shareholders agreement that you are getting, you are getting at least the same rights, or if the rights are downgraded, there has to be some reason attached to it, or you are agreeing to those downgradation of rights.
Tell me, can you change your mind between a term sheet and the actual shareholders agreement if you're an investor?
Yes, so we have seen some changes of investors' mind or the founders changing some stance between the term sheet and the shareholders agreement. However, the practical side of things is that generally the term sheet is handed over to the lawyer who then drafts it. However, if it is mutually agreed change, then it is okay. Again, it is a non-binding document, term sheet, but the industry generally follows and respects a signed term sheet as good as a Indian contract only. So ideally, you should not change it unless it is a mutual change and not a unilateral change.
Varun, one small question from Suresh Menon on this side. One of the things which I've observed in a shareholders agreement is affirmative voting rights. So why that should not be imposed as one of the important points for angel investors? Because a lot of things, the differences do come up unless you have a clear-cut affirmative voting rights or veto matters. What do we call it?
Correct. Let's discuss the affirmative voting rights as well. Affirmative voting rights primarily means that you are mentioning that certain important decisions of the company should be taken only after you take prior consent from the investor. What this means is that, say, for example, there are 2-3 standard clauses there. One clause can be that in case you are spending any value above 5 lakh rupees, say, for example, you take an office and you are taking say 5 lakh rupee worth of expense in a year, then you've got to take a prior permission from the investors. So affirmative voting rights primarily means that angel investors feel that there are some important clauses or important decisions. Just make sure that you involve us in these important decisions, or at least take pre-permission from us. Pre-permissions can be one, doing certain expenditure above a certain value. Step one can be say 5 lakh rupees or above. Please do ask angel investors. Second, in case you make any changes to the directorial board, some director resigns or you are appointing a new director. Third, you are hiring an employee above a value of say 20 lakh rupees. Fourth, you are maybe starting a new office in a certain new jurisdiction or a locality. So make sure that you ask. Now, all these points keep on varying from startup to startup. Say, for example, if one startup is capital heavy, for installation of machinery, they would want, say, 5 lakh rupees each. So obviously that is part of the regular businesses. So what you've got to look at from an affirmative right perspective is that any important expense or any important change, like changing articles or memorandum of the company, hiring a new CTO, or firing an employee who was holding ESOP. So these are actions that are to be included in the affirmative rights to make sure that the angel investor is aware, known about all these changes. It's all about information. You want to have as much information flowing from the startup to you, so that to ensure that your investment is safe and secure.
I think just one point I want to mention, Varun, you talked about quarterly information rights. I think in DF Angel, we are trying to get it into a monthly information right.
Not everyone, but yes, monthly I would say is slightly hard, but
I think it's putting up a little more discipline on the both sides, on investors and on startups. And I think the objective here was, how can we help startups? How can we help founder where they are struggling? Not from a questioning point of view, but more from a their struggle and pain, and how can we resolve that through a vast network that we bring on the table.
Vivek, that is the right way of doing it. I think mostly our companies are taking MIS only. It is monthly information statement, take people ticket. Even a lot of private equities also insist for MIS, basically monthly information. Correct. Quarterly, they come to the board anyway, basically.
Yeah. So I think our intention also is to find out problems or pain areas early, so that we can resolve them early with the help of our vast network.
That's absolutely correct.
I think we are not, as we said in Dfan, we are not looking for pure investors. If you're coming as an investor, I think there are other alternative investment routes. I think if you're coming in startup and if you're joining Dfan, you should be ready to add value to startup from your network. It could be your consulting, it could be your network, it could be getting them some order, whatever it may be. That's why I think we want to encourage a smart investor per se as part of the startups.
Correct.
Varun, you can summarize the last 5 points.
Okay, let me summarize the last 5 points. Perhaps I can mention one more.
Yeah.
All the 15 points as well. Okay, so the last 5 points are valuation, board observer and board of directors, intellectual property and intellectual property assignment agreement, who bears the fees for the failed financial and legal due diligence, and in case of successful investments, and extrapolation of rights from term sheet to shareholders agreement, and from one shareholders agreement to the other shareholders. These are the 5 last points.
Thank you, Varun.
Thanks a lot, Varun. I think
it was a wonderful experience. It was a wonderful experience. I think we have given a good knowledge. Many of these 15 points were not even known to people. I think your session is really wonderful in educating the angel investors. And I think we can take questions maybe offline. They can write to us and we'll forward it to Varun. Varun is part of our team. He helps us in conducting the making term sheets and SHAs, and also conducting the due diligence. Whatever investments we have made, Varun and his team has done the due diligence. So thanks, Varun, for the wonderful work. And I mean, sorry we keep you chasing more than what you expect from us, but I think that's what the job is. Thank you, Varun, for your wonderful association.
No
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for the hard work your team puts in for all the DF Angel investment related activities.
Wonderful. It was very nice talking to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you.
Sorry, I think we missed somebody who said. Okay, thank you guys. I think we can summarize. We are already over time. So we can summarize this. Thank you all.
Thank you.